asking Mayor and Council to consider the implementation of a voluntary reconciliation contribution fund for 2023. A similar fund in the city of Victoria, besides being entirely voluntary, allows residents to make an annual contribution of any amount, is entirely separate from their property tax bill, is private, and 100% of funds will go to the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. A lot has already been done by the district to develop stronger ties with Chianu, so this is just one more action that can be taken on this ongoing process. We see exploring the implementation of a fund as a process and this letter as a first step. It is a way that we as individuals acting collectively can acknowledge and redress in a very small way entrenched injustice. The 94 calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada made clear that municipalities have a key role to play in reconciliation, and that reconciliation must be more than words but also include action. A reconciliation contribution fund is both concrete in that it sets up a mechanism to gather and distribute funds, and also symbolic in that it visibly acknowledges historic systemic injustice. We think the idea of a Metchosin fund should be first and foremost discussed with Chianu First Nation, and if implemented, be done in accordance with their wishes. We think the proper protocol is for government-to-government contact, but we also see this as an opportunity for Metchosin residents to talk in the community about reconciliation and further ways this can be achieved. As well, it might also be an opportunity for community-community contact. I have heard criticisms that such a fund would be patronizing, but concerning the Victoria Fund, the Songhees Nation said in a statement that it appreciates the efforts of Victoria's Council and residents on the reconciliation initiative and see it as a meaningful and tangible step towards reconciliation. Catherine LaGrange, who's the Songhees Executive Director, said, "We hope this sets a precedence for other cities and municipalities to follow suit." I've also heard criticisms that this fund is initiated from those who are acting from settler guilt. Setting aside the inappropriateness of others commenting on our inner motivations, and that such comments are a common strategy to divert attention from the substance of an issue by criticizing the speaker, I want to put in a good word for guilt. When I was 7, I probably was a little older, but for the record I'm saying 7, I once stole sweets from a local shop, and I felt so guilty I never shoplifted again. I never set foot in that shop for about 20 years until the person who owned it died, actually. And I didn't eat any of the candy, I just threw it all away. So guilt is a mechanism that tests the limits of our moral compass, and for me it helps me figure out what is the right thing to do. As the only person who can speak about my motivation for signing this letter, I will say it comes from a sincere desire for reconciliation and to help redress wrongs. We're requesting that our letter be forwarded to the Finance and Environment Committee to explore the concept and mechanisms for implementation, including how best to consult with Chianu. The group of Metchosin residents who are supporting this letter are willing to work with the Finance and Environment Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. What's that?
Name and address.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I should have asked for your name and address.
Oh, sorry, did I forget? Diana Smith, 4488 William Head Road.
For purpose of our recording. Thank you.
Sarah Anthony, 4290 Metchosin Road. So I don't think there's anyone here in Metchosin who's not, oh my computer just shut up, who's not aware that there is a housing crisis affecting not only Victoria but much of southern BC. It's deeply hurting our communities, with many being forced to move away from their families. Businesses are struggling to keep workers as it's so difficult to find accommodation here, and many who cannot leave due to family or employment issues are stuck living in vehicles. A few concerned residents of Metchosin and Souk found each other on Facebook and started to wonder if we could do anything about this. We opened up a discussion on Facebook, and in 24 hours, over 100 Metchosinites joined our Facebook group to discuss this issue. A big concern for most people in Metchosin is how can we help people find homes without compromising Metchosin's rural character and avoid subdividing, and as well as protect our beautiful natural habitats and farmland. Let me tell you, there were some really great suggestions, but for today we'd like you to consider the one we feel would do the most right now to help people struggling to keep a roof over their heads. What we would love for council to consider is amending bylaw 259 to include RVs and movable tiny homes in the language. For the purposes of this, I would like to request to differentiate a movable tiny home from simply a tiny home, because I think that current bylaw would cover a small house, I believe under 70 square meters. So what would be the benefits of this? It's really not the best way to do this. The current bylaw allows for suites to be built, which are extremely expensive and are permanent additions to the properties. RVs and movable tiny homes can be moved without any long-term changes to the property. Renting out a tiny home pad on one's property can provide a much-needed additional rental income to residents without having to invest tens of thousands of dollars building a suite. Property owners can also rent out their personal RVs for additional income. RVs and tiny homes are not too difficult to hook up to existing sewage and water, and don't always need to be continually connected. If sewer is difficult to connect to, there are services that remove black water. People currently living in Metchosin in a tiny home or RV do not need to live in fear of being evicted. If the situation is reported, and driving around Metchosin, it seems like there are a lot of people living in RVs and tiny homes right now. And we believe it would attract people who would respect the calm and natural beauty of Metchosin. We recognize that there may be some minor challenges to amending this bylaw due to inspection issues, particularly as regards mobile tiny homes, but there is a huge movement right now to get the province to make them legal dwellings, and there are other municipalities which seem to be considering amending their bylaws to include them, such as Nanaimo, oddly enough. As for RVs, whether officially or not, you have only to look at Fort Victoria, which is, as we're hearing, a 2-year wait list right now because so many people are just living there permanently. So the bottom line is people are living in RVs and tiny homes and cars and tents right now as they have nowhere else to go, and we would think it would be nice if we were able to find more places for them to park and feel safe. In closing, I think it would be an amazing example to other communities to see that in this desperate time, Metchosin stepped up and helped people, and hopefully it'll encourage other municipalities to do their part for the people in this region who are struggling to keep a roof over their head. And just want you to know that if you want us to do any research or anything or make calls, we are happy to help with that. Thank you so much.
So before you go, just to make it clear that what you're recommending is just adding another provision to the bylaw, which would be either or.
Yes, not like a whole, like not both, but instead of having a suite, you could have a tiny home or RV.
It's an interesting concept. Council, do you have any questions on this? Go ahead, Councillor.
Well, it is a concept that with proper inspections for the sewer, water, and hookup and fire inspections, it is a concept that I agree with, because I think, as you mentioned, cost of building a secondary suite is prohibitive for many homeowners and people looking to rent as well. So I think it's worth looking into for sure.
So, Council, would you be okay perhaps if this presentation was made with a little bit more detail to the Planning Committee? Councillor Kahakawala, what do you think of that?
My understanding, Sarah, is that you've had a couple of conversations with our planner already.
Yes, with the
Sherry?
planner, one with the planner, and
Okay.
we've spoken.
Yeah, well, I know you and I have spoken, but my understanding is you've also spoken with Sherry. I had
Yes,
I
we
had
did.
spoken with her afterwards. Okay. Yeah, I'm fine to have this placed on my agenda.
Okay.
So,
Good.
I will. New planner's coming in tomorrow, so probably look at doing a transition piece between Sherry and our new planner, and see about connecting with you to have you come and do a presentation at one of our upcoming planning committee meetings.
Okay, should I just contact you this week, or?
You know what? I would send an email to planner@metchosin.ca.
Okay.
And you're welcome to copy me as well, Kiara@metchosin.ca, and then I'll speak with the staff tomorrow.
Okay, thanks so much, everyone.
Next, for public participation.
Good evening, Shelley Donaldson, Chalister Court resident. On the agenda this evening, there is a memo from Public Works Consultant Joe Martinego, and it's in regards to the road resurfacing budget. I followed all of the budget meetings. Actually, I was in attendance for all of them this last fall and winter. And in this particular memo, it talks about the approval of, excuse me, that the budget approval was for $1 million to do some road resurfacing for this coming year. And so the bid went out for the Arden Road, portion of Arden Road to be paved, Rocky Point to be paved, and Windover Terrace. So my particular query is the Rocky Point section from Kangaroo to Happy Valley Road. And just before I came here, I thought I'd come a little bit earlier, and so I drove up there because it's a road I traverse on at least 3 days a week. What I see is a road that is seriously got a lot of cracks in this section and potholes. The rest of it's actually in not bad a shape. But the fact that we're really concerned about our policing costs that we still don't know a lot about, if we forego paving that complete section and do a crack and seal maintenance on it, as well as pothole maintenance, I think that we could start saving some money instead of spending a lot of money on the amount of paving that we're doing of roads that are in pretty good shape. That road beyond Happy Valley to Kangaroo all the way up has an incredible amount of dump traffic, and like many neighborhoods where we're starting to see a lot of cracking on our roads, has the weekly garbage trucks and or the what was today in our neighborhood was the recycle trucks, which is why we're seeing more and more of the deterioration of our roads. But in visiting other municipalities as of late who are also doing maintenance on their roads, I don't see our municipality doing any crack sealing as we have done in the past, and I don't see any patching of potholes. So given all of what I've just said, I would like some consideration to maybe saving $350,000 this year on doing that section, and maybe we go back to doing the crack sealing and the patching, especially that we don't have sufficient funds to probably cover our policing costs. It's just a point of something to consider.
Thank you, Sherry. We have been through this years ago, where we looked at the cost of capital investment in our roads versus maintenance of the roads. And I mean, if you graph it, there's a crossover point. If you put your capital in and your maintenance, there's a crossover where the maintenance exceeds the cost of what you would have spent on the capital. And the reason that we can get by in this municipality with fundamentally 3 public works employees is because we chose to put the money into the capital rather than into the maintenance. And yes, we do have the crack sealer, and we have done crack sealing, and we're looking at crack sealing again in some spots. But as a deterrent to paving, crack sealing, it's not intended to do that really. It's intended to protect the base, so you don't get water coming through your cracks into the base and costing you more. But if you take a look at what the cost of machine patching is, it's about 3 times the cost of an overlay. So, I mean, we've done these calculations over and over again, and always came to the conclusion that it's cheaper in the long run to put the capital investment in, have the maintenance at as low a rate as possible. So, I mean, that's why we do it.
Yeah, I do understand that, and I understand that we are in for a lot of expense with policing, clearly it's working for other municipalities to do the crack and seal and patching, and I also understand from a little bit more research on road issues as it affects my particular neighborhood, that crack sealing will give you 5 to 10 years more on those roadways as well. So I do respect what you have to say with what our public works is doing and the fact that we have done this in the past. I think if we were to forego the paving of this area for at least 1 year, and see where our finances are in regards to supporting our pending policing costs, that I think that would be a valuable
I appreciate that, and one of the reasons that we have put, I mean, it's been calculated, and Andy and Sam Weller have certainly, I mean, Sam's advice has been that we put $1 million a year into our roads in order to maintain an equilibrium. And our roads are in good shape, better shape than most. If you take a look at places that follow the machine patching, pothole filling, things like Saanich, they've got roads that are an absolute mess and cost them a fortune. So that's something that we have tried to avoid. But we always had it in the backs of our minds that if there was an extraordinary circumstance, we could curtail paving for probably a year or two and not cause ourselves too much long-term harm. We don't know what the policing costs are. It doesn't look good. And I think that the next council will probably be considering what you suggest, which is maybe curtailing altogether the paving program for a year or so to try and buffer the costs of the policing until such time that we can address how we pay that on a permanent basis.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
So, yeah, thank you.
Hi again, Nicole Sheekin, Le Bon Road resident. I want to say just a few words in support of Diana's and in fact the joint initiative to begin exploring the possibility of a reconciliation fund. Just to speak generally, I really like the concept of a voluntary fund, which isn't mandatory like a tax, but a mechanism by which only those citizens who want to have a way of materially contributing to something widely deemed to be of social, ethical, or environmental value. So in this case, a reconciliation fund. Submission of this letter, as Diana said, is just the first step in a process that the signatories feel would be most appropriately explored through government-to-government outreach and consultation with Chianu. Their interest, consent, and guidance on the proper protocols to follow is an absolute must when it comes to the possibility of a reconciliation fund. As you know, Metchosin has recently signed on to the standstill agreement with the Chianu Nation and others, which is an agreement to explore fundraising concepts that could potentially support an Indigenous protected area on Mary Hill lands. Now, Metchosin's recent willingness to explore fundraising concepts in relation with Chianu is heartening. A reconciliation fund grown out of entirely voluntary annual contributions that could be administered by the district at the same time as it sends out tax notices soon is a fundraising concept of another kind, but it's one that we hope Council will also agree deserves to be explored through consultation with Chianu. So like the other signatories to the letter here tonight, I hope Council will refer the concept of this fund to the Finance and Environment Committee for deeper consideration. And we also genuinely seek Council's input and opinion on best approaches so that we can begin learning and working together to explore this possibility with Chianu Council and community members, as well as the community of Metchosin. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Anyone else?
Thank you, Avril Yoakum, Windfall Road. Thinking about the Buckingham, I'm curious why you would consider changing the application for smaller lots, and I presume it's for parkland, where in fact, I believe, Mayor Rands, you said you didn't want the liabilities or the maintenance of the green buffer for parks trails. So what makes this different for Beckingham?
Well, the reality is, Avril, that I'm pretty much neutral on this. I can see advantages on having it just a 5-acre subdivision, and I can see advantages in the amenity. And it depends, again, I think one of the biggest advantages is protection of the aquifer for the amenity. The idea when we first originated this wasn't necessarily for parkland, and I think I already said this, or recreational use. It was for preservation of environmentally sensitive areas. And
Well,
hence Buckbrush Swamp, which was a significant environmental area, and we got to preserve it in its entirety.
Well, can't that be done under your environmental studies? Wouldn't that be mandatory?
What you would have is areas that would not be developable.
Right.
So if a person purchased the lot, then there would be areas that they couldn't build on. But that doesn't protect the whole. I mean, if it was a wetland that got carved up into about 4 or 5 different lots, then that's what you have. You have 4 or 5 different portions of that environmental wetland owned by various residents. So. Again, I mean, that's if the amenity thing goes forward, then it'd be a matter of a public opinion on it. As I said, I've got mixed feelings either way on it.
I would think environmental studies would demand that the property has to be subdivided to take in and preserve the environmental aspects of the property. As far as the parkland, I still don't get it. You were adamant about not wanting.
I'm not talking about parkland.
Pardon me?
I said I'm not talking about parkland. I'm talking about preservation of environmentally sensitive areas. I agree, we've got enough parkland.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that.
Hi, Jay Shukin, 5340 Le Bon Road, and I'm just speaking as an individual right now. So I too wanted to add my voice in support of the Reconciliation Fund that Diana and Nicole had talked about. You know, the letter did 2 things. It was a call out to various community groups in Metchosin to see what we could do to build connections to Chianu. And I do want to congratulate Council because the district and Council has done some wonderful work with the Maryhill Agreement recently, and the reconciliation agreement, of course. The goal and the vision I would have is that we begin to deepen and broaden those contacts as well with Chianu. But the question is, why a reconciliation fund? Just to echo some of the points that Diana made, this would be absolutely voluntary. It is not a tax, and it would be something that provide financial resources to the Chianu Nation. And again, why would we advocate for a reconciliation fund? And all of us, there are 10 of us, 11 of us who signed that letter, we're all aware that there's a history to the lands that we're on, not only locally, but throughout Canada as well. And that history involves the ability of some to gain wealth and privilege, and also for others to gain cultural dispossession, poverty. Some have called it cultural genocide as well, and that lives today. So the Reconciliation Fund is an attempt to make a material redress toward addressing some of those past issues. But the key thing, it is just, we recognize everyone who signed that letter, the fund is just one step in a larger process. We all recognize that it's a process that will take many steps and many years to take. So our goal tonight is not to have council confirm its views one way or the other on this fund. We recognize that there are complexities with it, and we recognize there are mixed views on this, and believe me, I've heard a number of them today. So all we wanted to do is ask council to refer this letter to Finance and Environment, where it might be considered further, and we'll go from there. Key thing, of course, Diana and Nicole mentioned this, is that the fund be developed in dialogue and discussion with the Chianu Nation. But we thought this would be a good place to start with here in our own council and open the forum for consideration here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jay. Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Courtney Sage Lancaster, and I reside at 4730 Eels Road. I don't have anything prepared because I wasn't planning to speak tonight, but then I received a message from somebody who is facing homelessness here in Metchosin. I just wanted to share their story and then share something about what they're doing in the Island and Trust in the Salt Spring area with the other islands as well, I believe. So this email was actually sent to council and the mayor, I think, today, so it might not have been received yet. But I'll just read this out. So, hi, my name is Dar, and I have lived in Metchosin for 17 years. He states the address. It's on Happy Valley. I'm not sure if I should share that publicly. In a second trailer. As of midnight tomorrow on the 31st, myself and my mom, who is 93, and our dogs will be homeless. As we have nowhere to move our mobile trailer to, we'll be staying in our trailer until we are removed though, or we find a place to move it. This is so a driveway can go through our trailer. I understand we do not own the land, but to let someone become homeless because I will not get rid of my dogs. So he's emotional, that's why he couldn't make it tonight. This world has changed so much. I would attend the meeting tonight, but I am just under so much stress. I hope you read this. If you'd like to contact me, please do. As myself, I am a property owner here in Metchosin, and this doesn't even sound like an unlawful dwelling, but he has nowhere to go, and it's just, it makes me emotional that somebody in this situation has no support and nowhere to go, and we've been promoting him, like trying to find a place for him, and we just haven't found anything. Okay, and then so just quickly here, I'll just read this out. So this is what Salt Spring has done regarding unlawful dwellings. And it was moved and seconded on, this was actually last June, the end of June 2021, about unlawful dwellings. So it was moved and seconded that the Salt Spring Island Local Trust Committee endorsed the Housing Action Program Task Force's recommendation to amend Standing Resolution SS 2021-109 to state that the enforcement activities will be deferred for all existing unlawful dwellings being used as residential purposes until there are safe, secure, and appropriate housing options that are affordable for all demographics and household types, except for the following circumstances. There's concerns regarding health and safety. There are concerns that sewage is not being disposed of in an approved septic or sewage disposal system. There are concerns that septic or sewage disposal systems are being used in excess of capacity or ability as a result of unlawful dwellings. So this is something that could be discussed later and addressed with the containers, with the trucks picking them up and so on. There are concerns about possible contaminations of wells or drinking water sources. Also solutions to that by trucking water in, not using the well to not drain the aquifer. Unlawful dwellings are environmentally environmentally sensitive areas, and there are non-permitted campgrounds. And then, so yeah, so I think it's just for Salt Spring, but I know it was with Islands and Trust. That Salt Spring Island Local Trust Committee may give direction to resume enforcement activities on any property that poses risk to health and safety of the neighboring residents and the residents on the property in question. So yeah, I just wanted to share that. That's another solution that they're working on Salt Spring. And then, yeah, I don't know if anybody knows where Dar and his mom can go. I don't know, because that I know is more of a private thing where the landlord has asked them to move out of a lawful dwelling. But I think it just illustrates that there's just not suitable housing or places for people to go at this time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I think that as you know, the discussion with regards to the RV thing has some merit, and you can see that the council will be at least looking at that proposal and providing the ability for public to weigh in on it. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? Nope. Okay, then we'll move on the agenda. We'll take adoption of the minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Kahakawala, second by Councillor Rett. Discussion. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Next is the receipt of the minutes, Finance and Environment Committee. Councillor McKinnon.
Move receipt.
Second.
Second by Councillor Kahakawala. Discussion. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Gets us to the mayor's report. We've got a few things to report, but I think a better person than I to make this report would be Councillor Epp with regards to some of the events that are coming up and events that have just taken place, which is the garage sale.
Thanks very much for letting me know in advance. Well, as most of you know, the Mighty Metchosin Garage Sale was held over the weekend. This is an event put on by the Metchosin Community Association, and the funds go to maintain, support the Metchosin Community House, which, if you don't know, has all kinds of activities going on there all during the week and evenings, and is also available for rent. So it's really quite an amazing facility. It was shut down quite a bit during COVID, but now it's really back in action. The garage sale drop-off started on Saturday of the long weekend, and volunteers, it's all completely volunteer run, spent hours and hours and hours all through the long weekend and all through the week collecting donations. And being there most of the time, we kind of thought there might be a lull the odd time, but 3 years of stuff being stored in people's carports and garages and basements and spare rooms, just sent car after truck after trailer, van, just about everything, unloading all their stuff for 7 days. So anyway, the sale was a massive success despite rain and wind, and has raised a huge amount of money. I don't have the exact figures. We did have the fancier, more collectible items were inside the community house for a silent auction, and the silent auction alone brought in approximately $8,000. So,
wow.
And the garage sale was way up there. Yeah. So maybe the next meeting I'll be able to report more on how much that garnered, but it's really is great because it'll support the community house very well for all the things that it needs in the future. So that's one thing. Another thing coming up on Saturday is the Metchosin Senior Association is having their annual, well, except for COVID, Parisian Cafe, which is to recognize all the volunteers that help out seniors in the community. The Senior Association runs the Metchosin, the Seniors Resource Center, which is based in the old school, and they keep tabs on many of the vulnerable citizens in the community. They offer volunteer driving for people to go to hospital appointments, dental appointments, to get groceries, offer companionship and various programs they've put on. So anyway, this is kind of a thank you to the volunteers, the recognition of the seniors, and it's free. It'll be located from 10 a.m. to noon, right in front of the MACA building of the old school portion. And so they'll have coffee, tea, and a jar for volunteer for donations. So, and pastries and so on. So it's quite a neat event, and some music and draw prizes and so on. So what else was I supposed to add? What am I missing?
Event on June 12th.
Oh yeah, that one. So one of the residents of Metchosin, an older woman who just really wanted to have some nice community event that would also raise some money for Ukraine, suggested the idea of kind of a sort of a low-key concert, and that is going to be held on June 12th, Sunday, from 1 to 3 p.m. There'll be some local musicians and performers taking turns on the stage at the pavilion, which is right over there. Over there. And yeah, and So, and we're just going to be, you know, cash, just have a few buckets set around to people wanted to contribute some money towards the Ukraine. So she envisioned it as being a post-COVID, you know, kind of community gathering where people could get together with their neighbors after a long drought and also do some good. So I think that's just about
It's a
it.
lot better than I could have done, so.
July 1st? I was gonna say July
Oh,
1st.
yeah,
One more.
just one more. And July 1st, the Metchosin Arts and Cultural Association, which is located in the Arts Center in the old school, is having a July 1st event. As far as the details, I'm not completely sure of. I don't think they've completely set them up yet. They're hoping to have different community groups involved kind of around the whole sort of Metchosin village area. They're going to have a stage set up by the school, so there's going to be various performers going on throughout the day. They're going to have a cake, and then they're hoping to also spread out, possibly to have some artisans and stuff on the grounds on where the market takes place, and a few other things I think they have up their sleeves just to have another community event going on. As again, I don't have the details on the times and so on, but I'm sure we'll keep you posted. I think it'll be in the, there might be something in this muse, is there? I haven't read it yet, so there might be something in there, but anyway, just check out the MACA website and find out the details of that. And I think that's definitely is gotta be everything.
It's not bad.
Thank you, Councillor. Just sort of an odd story that flowed out of the silent auction. Quite a number of years ago, we traded an organ, my wife and I, that our kids played on. It's electronic organ, foot pedals, and it was a nice machine, I thought. We traded it to the Buchanans for a trailer. Well, as time went on, both of us, we didn't have the use for the trailer, so we gave it back to the Buchanans, and they wanted to give the organ back to us, and we thought, well, if you can find a better use for it. So they donated it to the silent auction with the understanding that if nobody bought it, it would come back to us. So nobody bought it. So if anybody wants a nice organ,
Grandchildren.
you know who,
grandchildren.
you know
They
who
can
to
have one.
contact.
She's holding him down.
I tried so hard to bid, and she basically was telling me that
Oh, really?
I'd be homeless if I.
There's not a tiny home close enough for you?
Wow. It's a really nice instrument.
We saw that organ come
Wow.
in on the trailer. We had it on. We all kind of stood there going, "Do we really want this organ?"
Yeah, I kind of said the same thing.
At least there was a backup plan for you to get rid of it.
I tell you what, it works very well, and it's just oh yeah.
Oh, there you go. The senior center?
You know who to contact if you can, sort of win her over. But anyways, okay, we'll move on. So we have reports for action. There is the tender approval regarding the SCBA. Councillor Kahakawilla.
Yeah, I'm happy to move the recommendation from our chief that we support the purchase of the self-contained breathing apparatus as outlined in the District of Metchosin tender document 2022-002 and award the tender to Gullivan Fire Safety in the amount of $169,536.31.
Seconded by Councillor Epp. Discussion. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Next item, the request for the emergency preparedness.
Nope, there's a second item on this one.
Oh, darn,
So-
that's sort of different now looking at it.
That's okay. So the amount that we had budgeted for was $180,000, and there is some funds left over, obviously with 170 being spoken for. And Fire Chief has been able to secure some additional bottles and equipment that would come under in total the $180,000. So I move that we allow the chief to move forward with the purchase of the additional equipment
Right.
for a maximum total spend of $10,464,000.
Seconded by Councillor Epp. Discussion. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Now we go to item B, community emergency preparedness.
I move that council support by way of resolution a $53,000 grant application under the UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund and authorize the mayor and corporate officer to execute any agreements related to a successful grant application.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councillor McKinnon. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Now we have item C, the Regional Electric Vehicle Charging Station Grant.
All right, I'll move that council endorse the following resolution to enable the CRD to submit a grant application for a regional electric vehicle charging network throughout the region that will include 2 stations in Metchosin. That the District of Metchosin participate in the CRD-led Regional Public Electric Vehicle Charging Network Project Grant application to the ICIP Clean BC Communities Fund Grant Program, and that the District of Metchosin agrees to supply the site at 4495 Happy Valley Road, the school, to install 2 of the EV Level 2 public EV charging stations. Just to be clear on this item, this is in addition to replacing our existing 2 EV chargers, one at the cafe and one at the community house, with new pay-as-you-go Level 2 chargers. So if this grant comes through, then we would have 4 Level 2 chargers in our downtown area.
I'll second the motion.
Seconded by Councillor Kahakawala. Any discussion on this? Call the question then. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Item D, the remove and replace from the pink. This is the highways issue.
I move that we remove the section in the original minutes referring to the resurfacing budget and replace it with the pink, which corrects an error in the amount. So what more than that?
No, that's already been done in the agenda. You need to move the recommendation.
Recommendation.
So I move the recommendation.
Understanding that the pink establishes the correct figures. Yeah.
So I recommend that the 2022 roads resurfacing program be awarded to the low bidder, Island Asphalt Company, in the amount of $653,572.50, including GST.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Kahakawala. Discussion. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. And now we move to the reports for information. We can take them both.
Move receipt.
Moved by Councillor Kahakawala, seconded by Councillor Epp. Discussion. Those in favor? Opposed, carried. We have the letter from Central Saanich with regards to the family physician crises, and a pink that from Steve Gray, Correspondence. I guess you can we can deal with that.
I've had several lengthy discussions with Steve on this particular issue, and his professional experience has in the past been in bargaining sessions with the physicians in British Columbia. And as he explains in his letter, he doesn't think that the Saanich recommendation has it quite right. And I think he makes a good case. So I would argue against Metchosin supporting the District of Saanich recommendation as it's written.
Well, I would say a motion to receive would probably be in order then. Councillor Kahakawala.
Yeah, I'm fine to move a motion to receive, but I was in thinking of this, it might not be a bad idea to perhaps invite our Metchosin doctor, Dr. O'Connor, who has been also working on this to get more representation and doctors, not only in his own practice but within British Columbia. And I think maybe this could be something that we could support, but in a different way, and have him come and do a presentation to council as to what that might actually look like.
If he has the time, I think that's probably a good idea. I know I've had him speak to our monthly mayor's meetings. They're all the mayors get together once a month and we discuss regional issues, and certainly this is one of the major ones. So we've had a couple of physicians speak so far, and I must say that Dr. O'Connor has had some pretty original ideas that were well received. So.
I think it, I mean, I would like to support the notion that we do need to look at redoing our system to make sure that we have enough doctors. And I know that just from my own personal experience speaking to him, but also hearing him speak at other events, and as you said, to different organizations and different groups, I think it would be a good start to have him come here if he has the time to do a presentation, and from there we can decide what action we may or may not want to take.
Sure. So then, understanding that, a motion to receive.
Move receipt.
Moved by Councillor Gahakawila, seconded by Councillor Epp. Discussion. You okay with that, Councillor McKinnon?
Works for me. Yep.
Okay. Call the question then. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. I presume that's an aye. And we move then to item 10B, which is the Reconciliation Contribution Fund proposal.
It was suggested by several speakers that this might be better represented at Finance and Environment Committee. Maybe I'll initiate the discussion on this item if that's all right with you, Mr. Chair.
Certainly. Go ahead, Councillor McKinnon.
Yeah. So, as several of the speakers mentioned, if this is to move ahead, it could only move ahead with the support of the Chianu Nation. And I would not like to bring it to Finance and Environment Committee or any other committee or council at this time until we've had that conversation with the Chiana First Nation. So I would not support a motion to simply bring this matter to Finance and Environment Committee. I feel the appropriate action item at this point is to reach out to Chianu to seek their input on this proposal from some of our residents in Metchosin. I appreciate the residents getting together and putting this proposal together, putting it before us. I think there's a lot of thought and good intent that goes into it. And I think the next step is to reach out to Chianu rather than to bring it forward on one of our agendas.
Yes, thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Anyone else?
I think at this point a move to receipt and leave it with maybe Mayor to Chief.
Yep. Okay. Seconded by Councillor Epp. Receipt motion. I'll just comment. I feel similarly to I think the rest of council on this one. There's a difference between relations and reconciliation. And I mean, we as a council have been involved for quite a number of years in relationship building. And I am convinced that true reconciliation doesn't happen until such time as you have got strong relations. And the relations in this community, as has been spoken about, we are considered leaders in relationship building through both the First Nations and regionally and even beyond. I mean, Chief Chips and I have spoken together on relationship building at the UBCM. I think we've got another one coming up in the next little while as we get in speaking to other First Nations groups. And I really want to sort of point out that as politicians, you know, we like to think things flow from us, and there certainly has been reconciliation initiatives that have flown from the political arm, but not reconciliation, I'm talking about relationship building, I'm sorry. And, but the real relationship building has taken place on a day-to-day basis with with Chiano First Nation for quite a number of years now, and that has flowed very significantly from our fire chief and the day-to-day relations she has. She works with them, from our CAO, Lisa Erlacher, who does similarly, working very freely and openly with Beecher Bay First Nations on initiatives that are of mutual benefit to us both. And reconciliation efforts without those relations can often produce negative results. I've seen this happen twice recently at the CRD, where there's been CRD initiated reconciliation attempts that have fallen flat and have not been accepted well by the First Nations, and that's because there hasn't been the relationships, trusting relationships established first. So we've already seen written criticisms of this approach, and my concerns are that we have to be careful with how we undertake initiatives like this, and I think Councillor McKinnon is entirely right. Is that they have to be done from the spirit of that relationship. We've got major initiatives that are undertaken with Mary Hill and things like that that require the trust and as we've heard Chief Chips express several times, just treating each other like human beings, and I think that's what we need to do. And maybe something like this can come at another time, but I think that it's something that I've always been cognizant of, is that the relationship building depends on, more than anything, the support of our residents, and a lot of it comes from our residents. And if we get residents that are turned away from that because they don't agree with the proposal like this, then that's not going to help us. It's not going to help anybody. So I think we have to be really cautious with something like this, that we don't turn our own residents against the whole idea of our growing and very positive relationship we have with Chiano. So anyway, that's kind of a bit of a ramble on my part, and I apologize for that, but that's kind of how I feel on this. So if there's no other discussion, I will call a question on the receiving motion. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. So that ends the business of the day.
Move receipt of the additional correspondence.
Move receipt of.
The additional correspondence in the pink.
Yes. I guess we need to do that. Well, by putting it on the agenda, didn't that imply that?
No.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
That's been received.
Yeah. Okay. So that puts us to the question period. Anybody?
I just had a question. I didn't quite hear what you said. I'm just going to speak personally, not for our 11 people, but I think we would totally agree to reach out to Sianu first. So that would be great. But I didn't quite catch who was going to do that or how that was going to happen.
I suggested mayor to chief.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So,
Sure.
a question and a request. I can't argue with the approach that has been moved on in terms of the reconciliation fund. But Mayor Renz, when you're talking with Chief Chips, this isn't just on overview, but if there's any way of discussing with him how the bonds between and the relationship between community members, Metchosin and Chiano, might be further developed, that would be wonderful to hear from him. And I totally get your point that there's a lot of work done with the district, and I do know that Chief Dunlop is very active with the Chiano community. She actually asked me to not refer to the communities, but ideally one community. Yeah, so if there's a chance to ask that of Chief Chips, how we might be able to strengthen ties, that would be great.
reconciliation.
Just wanted to say that one thing coming up is on June 18th, which is the barbecue. And that is, and there was one previously. I wasn't able to go to it, but I understand it was quite successful, and that was at Chianu. This one is going to be in Metchosin, at the fire hall, I'm assuming, in
The market area.
on the market area. So I think, and there's a notice about it on the sign by the fire hall. So I think that would be a wonderful way to connect community members from each community at something like that. Certainly a starting place, and that obviously is initiated by the chief. So that's one thing.
I'm wondering how far this relationship building has to go before we consider reconciliation. It sounds, from what Mayor Ann said, that there's already a relationship. So why can't we move to reconciliation in this small way that is being suggested? And it's an entirely voluntary thing, so people who are opposed to it don't have to participate at all. I just don't know how far this relationship building has to go before we talk about reconciliation.
Well, I mean, we do talk about reconciliation when it came to, for example, the Mary Hill issue. I mean, that's something that we are working together, and it's not just the Chianu Nation and Metchosin. It's the Habitat Acquisition Trust, Pearson College, and again, ultimately, the community that we're all going to have to pull together on if this is going to happen. And I think that is a genuine reconciliation attempt that we can do, that we are able to work together on because of the relationship that's building that's taken place. If we can achieve the Mary Hill becoming an Indigenous protected area, then that's a huge reconciliation step that will benefit Chianu First Nation, but it would also benefit us in terms of being able to see the land preserved. So, Naseem, I think that I mean, we are doing both, but I don't want to see any of our reconciliation efforts jeopardized by having members of the community opposed to something that we're doing in terms of what you're suggesting. And again, and we've got correspondence already where there's residents that are quite adamantly opposed to it, and I don't think that is helpful in terms of achieving the overall reconciliation that we're trying to achieve with Mary Hill.
So may I ask what their opposition is to this?
Have you seen the letters?
No.
Oh, yeah. Councillor Kakahawala.
Um,
I'll look for those letters.
I just wanted to make a sort of a comment and an observation. So Metchosin has a very strong relationship with Chianu First Nation, and it's not something that's happened just because people have been talking about reconciliation over the last 5 to 10 years. It's something that has been happening for a very long time, and albeit there wasn't directed and concerted efforts made in the past, the relationship building has been going on through Hans Helgeson School, for example. When my sons were going there, about 30% of our population at the school was from Beecher Bay First Nations. And the relationships started back then. My son, Koa, one of his good friends was Jeannie, who is Chief Chip's daughter. And the friendships that you could see that were developed through children at that school, it was a full community. It was Metchosin and Chianu. It wasn't just Metchosin. And so Metchosin has a very, I think, direct history with working with Chianu. Councillor Milne spent almost her entire time here on council working to develop and strengthen that relationship, and she was really good at it. And she was able to bridge a lot of gaps that had been there in the past. We have hosted several events, joint events with Beecher Bay because of the efforts that she put in, and those efforts to this day continue. agree with it or not, the land swap was a huge step forward for reconciliation. And it was something that hadn't even been contemplated by the province or other First Nations within BC or within Canada. And so we helped spearhead that. We have shown through action, not just words, that we can work, we want to work with, and we have an affinity with the people who live right next to us at Beecher Bay. They are our community just as much as we're them. And so I think the concerns that have been raised by some of the people that have submitted letters is that if you start on something like a reconciliation fund, it can almost be divisive, and I think that's what the concern is. So those that do contribute, those that don't. And it's already been talked to tonight about, that those that want to contribute can, but there are some people who maybe they can't contribute monetarily, but they want to do it in a different way, but it might seem diminished because they can't sign up to the fund. So I think, reaching out to Beecher Bay, finding out from them how they feel about something like this. This was controversial in the city of Victoria, and I don't want to see that become this here. Your intentions are pure. Your intentions are well-meaning, and I appreciate the effort you put in with the letter that you sent. But I think at this point in time, with the relationships we've already created and cultivated with our neighbors and with our equals, with our peers, that we've already made huge leaps. So let's find out from them what they really want to see from us to continue on that path. And if in the end it does end up with something like a reconciliation fund, great. But let that be community driven. Let that be from their spirit to us.
Sorry,
Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to make a quick suggestion. If the fella that set that up in Victoria is my old boss, Greg Candler, and I would suggest contacting him because I could give you his name later or write it down because it's hard to spell. I know because I had to say it over the phone a lot in the past. But yeah, if you want that information, he's a good guy, and this was his dream to set this up. So.
I'm going to tell you a little story about City of Victoria.
We could be here all night.
Yeah. Just in the last couple of weeks, the CRD has approved changing their procurement policy to no longer accept bids on a qualified low bid process. If a First Nation owned company or a company that has something identifiable to do with First Nations bids on a project or a service, then they can be the high bid and they can still get it. Now, there's to my mind, there's a real danger to that, and up to $500,000, for instance, the CAO can approve it without it ever coming to the board. If it's a contract that's above $500,000, then it has to be approved by the board. But the definition of a First Nation company is really loose, and to me, the opportunity for misuse is very strong built into that. The whole foundation of a fair and equitable governmental process based on contractual procurements is the qualified low bid process, and that's not in the procurement policy anymore. It's gone. So I called up Chief Chips and actually, I mean, I contacted and spoke to the band council in its entirety, and their CAO and their legal representative, and asked them, what do you think about this? I'm going to have to vote on this thing. What do you think about it? And they hadn't even heard about it. Not only had Beecher Bay not been consulted on it, the JFK Law, who represents all of the Timuc First Nations, hadn't heard about it. So I thought, okay, well, that's a kind of a fairly easy motion to get approved, that we defer the decision until such time as the First Nations band councils have been consulted at least and asked if they want it. Well, City of Victoria spoke against that, and it was approved. And when it came right down to it, the only one that voted for my motion to refer and consult with the First Nations was me. So that kind of underscores, I mean, I pointed out that this was a top-down approach that, I mean, it's rather colonial, thinking that we can come up with great ideas for First Nations without even talking to them, but that didn't seem to make any difference. So I'm just trying to underscore that we still have a long ways to go in terms of I guess the relationship building again, you know, like when you have a group like the City of Victoria who kind of led the opposition, at least the mayor did, and is willing to pass something that they think is a good idea, but we don't have to talk to First Nations about it. I think there's a ways to go yet. So anyway, that's just a little story that I never intended to talk about, but what the heck, eh? Shelley.
Yes, can you clarify the location of the EV station that's being proposed, please?
Andy?
I missed the end of that, Shelley. The
She-
location of what?
She wants to know the locations of the EV stations.
The processes are underway as we speak to replace the two existing EV stations, the one at the cafe and the one at the community house, with pay-as-you-go stations. And the proposal is that if we get support for this CRD initiative, the proposal as it stands right now is that we would put two charging stations over by the old school. So we would have four in fairly close proximity in the city core.
Okay, so second part to that question, we seem to have some serious concerns in the village about parking. So is that something that's going to be taken into consideration for that site, given that we have a tenant there that's going to require a certain amount of parking as well?
Did you hear that, Andy?
I only caught bits of it.
The concern was,
but did it have to do with concerns about parking spaces?
yes.
Yeah, and we would certainly, if we got support for this CRD proposal for an additional 2 spaces, then we would begin serious discussions with the community and with Public Works about where the best place for those additional 2 EV charging stations would be. For the purpose of the CRD proposal, we've suggested at the old school, which is probably suitably vague for this point in the process.
You okay with that, Shelley?
As long as somebody has some input on that, I know the concern for parking is pretty serious right now, so don't know that that's the best location, that's all.
You hear that, Andy?
Yes, concern about whether that's the best location, and if we decide that's not the best location, then certainly we would have the leeway to put them someplace else. That's merely the initial suggestion.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions? There being none, then I'll take a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Kalakawala, second by Councillor Rett. Discussion. Andy, in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Thank you, Andy.
Motion carries. Thanks everybody for coming. It's nice to be able to have a full council chamber.